episode 43 with Lori Okimura on the 9 Point Start the Dream podcast.
Welcome to 9 Point Started with a Dream podcast. Our goal is to showcase the stories of athletes and the community that supports them by being authentic about their journey. Here's your host, Jacoby Gillum.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host as always, Jacoby Gillum. This episode was a little bit different. It was almost like a mentor call for me in a sense. It was supposed to be about learning Lori's journey, and we did. Lori is the USA Volleyball chairman. She does a lot of stuff with the Paralympics and everything she's doing within the sports. And it was kind of like one of those calls where it wasn't supposed to be about me, but ended up being about me. And everything she was saying is about humility and leadership, and a lot we can all learn from just hearing from her experience, just how she navigated her journey to be in a position where she can be a part of sports, but from a perspective that most people don't even think is possible. You know, the way she's able to give back to, you know, both sides, athletes and for people that want to work in sports. So great episode here. We go through her journey, just talking about just life and kind of how we can position ourselves in the future, you know, through just being more authentic, just kind of owning our journey in a sense. So great episode here with Lori. She's really a great person to connect with if you ever need somebody to talk to. Like, she's really a great person to, a great resource. So hope you enjoy, and let's get to it. Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
How are things for you?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing well. Are you out in California?
I am, yeah. This week I'm in California, which is great.
Awesome.
Good time zone. And you said you're traveling? You're in Arizona?
I live out in Phoenix.
Oh, okay. I was just there. Let's see, when was I just there? Last Thursday. Oh, a week ago.
Very cool.
Yeah, good place. I'll be back and at the end of the month, actually. I have a friend who's the CEO of the Global Sports Institute at ASU, and they do a big sports summit every year at the end of March. So he's putting that together, and I think it's the 29th or so. Have you heard of the institute, the Sports Institute?
I saw your post the other day on Instagram, and I was like, "Ooh, what is this?" So I'm going now. I'll be there for.
Oh, good. And I'll get to meet you.
Yeah, well, I'll see you there then.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's a really good event, and so Ken Shropshire is the gentleman in charge, and he brings together some pretty dynamic people, you know, to share ideas. And what I love about this summit, and I've gone to a lot of them, but what I love so much about it is it's a combination of students and professionals. Right. And the professionals aren't just speaking on the panels. Like last year, it was the first year, and I got to actually sit and do some exercises and workshops and roundtables with actual students, you know, which was great. God, I wish I would have had that opportunity when I was that age. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think you'll enjoy it.
Awesome.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so definitely, because I was reading like the lineup, and I was like, man, this is some good stuff. Just the whole, everyone there is like really, you know, established in their career field, from like people like yourself, people in the MLB, and I was like, wow, this is really going to be, and it's free.
It's free. Wow. It's free, and it's really it's very accessible. You know what I mean? Like I said, like last year, you know, there were panelists who did their thing, and then they would come into the audience or come into the gallery for the next panel, you know, and they would be interacting, like sitting, you know, right in there with the students. So it's almost like continuing education. You know, it was really nice, because oftentimes when you go to things like that, and they're all valuable in a different way, but oftentimes when you go to like these summits or seminars, and I encourage that for anybody breaking in or even already in, right, the industry, but sometimes it's very sterile. You know, you have the presentation, and it's, you know, dynamic and everything, but then, you know, there's a break and everybody disappears from the stage, and you don't really get a chance to you know, to like follow up anything, you know, with those people. So I really liked that aspect of this summit, you know, where there was a little bit more interaction, you know, especially where students could literally sit next to you and ask you about, you know, something that happened in the panel before, or as you're working with the students. It was more like a teaching exercise than a workshop. You know, it was really, really interesting format. So yeah, okay.
So question for you. So I was reading your background, you know, on your website, and I was like, so how did you get started, or what inspired you to really just kind of go into this world of sports?
Well, it's interesting. Most, you know, I get that question a lot, and most people are surprised to find out that, well, for me, it was just participating as a child. right? It was just sort of, being able to be a part of a team, right? Which is a terrific way to not only socialize for young kids, but it's also a great way to learn, those kind of life skills like sharing and communication and, things like that. So for me, I got started just by participating. And, as is the case, not everybody who plays sports will go on and continue to play sports at higher levels. They may stay involved on a recreational level. But then you sort of have to ask yourself, at the point that you can no longer continue, competitively, well, is there anything else that I can do, right, to stay involved in the sport that I've, become so attached to? And in my case, it was an opportunity to coach, and to learn how to coach younger kids. Around the time I was in college, there were opportunities. You got to find a job, right? Got to find 10 jobs, but playing was no longer an option, from a physical standpoint, medically and everything else. And so you have to sort of ask yourself, are there other ways for me to be involved? Are there other things about the sport or any sport, that I could still be learning, right? The minute you stop learning is the minute you're done, right? So there's always something you can learn, from somewhere. And so for me, it was, okay, since you're no longer physically able to participate, what other areas might you be interested in? And I was in school to study journalism and business, and so that always kind of caught my eye as like, well, how can I promote this sport better? How come we don't have more fans in the stands and things like that? From a practical standpoint, like I said before, like every college student needs a job or 2 jobs or 3 jobs, right? So the opportunity presented itself to learn a little bit about game management. I did an internship in the sports information office, but really the turning point was being offered an opportunity to stay with the women's volleyball team and learn how to coach and learn how to work behind the scenes, and then having that perspective, when you can no longer be an athlete yourself, right? And so that's how I got started. And lucky for me, and really, I'm not sure exactly how it happened. It certainly wasn't any sort of like big overarching plan, but the opportunities kept coming forward. As you make opportunities for yourself, obviously you make opportunities for other people, right? And in trying to do, learn as much as I could about the different areas that I was being exposed to, an opportunity came up when I was still in school, still finishing, college, and to work with a professional beach volleyball tour. And that sort of started the jump from one side of the industry, the team management, the college athletics, intercollegiate athletics world, and then to a more professional, a little bit more diverse commercial world, sponsors and agents and athletes and, more professionalism. And really it just, again, there's no master plan. I just was fortunate enough to be, to jump around from opportunity to opportunity, which saw me go from almost every side of the sport of volleyball in particular, and got to learn about this one industry, from many, many different angles. So whether, whatever your industry is, right, whatever your business is that you go into, your careers that you go into, to be able to see it from multiple perspectives is always a bonus. It's a gift. Right. I mean, not very many people will get a chance to do that. It's like people who are in, I was in sporting goods for a long time, and until I got into the manufacturing, and production of the actual products that we used to use as players, I never really understood exactly how deep, the connection goes, and how far, back the connection goes with athlete. Obviously you don't just show up and you have your balls, your nets, your fans and everything else. I mean, all of that comes from somewhere. All right. So to be able to understand a singular industry from multiple perspectives has probably been the most valuable experience so far.
Love that. And I think it's kind of cool. Kind of like kind of what I got from your whole thing was that if you just want to put in the work, opportunities come.
Right. And that's it. It's been interesting. The last couple of weeks I've been chatting with various college age students, whether they're business students or sports PR students. And then just last week, I got this week, Monday, I got a chance to sit down with a couple of student athletes from volleyball and soccer from a Miramar College in San Diego. And the topic actually was about humility, right? And
that's a good one.
And you think about, when you talk about humility, and I'll tell you how that topic came about. When you talk about humility, you have to talk about loyalty, and you have to talk about determination, right? And how the and oftentimes, every once in a while I get lucky enough to be asked to speak in a class. Usually they're sports business classes, or sports PR classes, or for student groups. And it's usually the same topic, because it's relevant, is that they need to figure out, like, how's the best way to get work experience and to find jobs, and things of that nature, networking, relationship building. But about a month ago, I was sitting at a men's college volleyball match, and I was somewhat surprised. I really love, obviously I love volleyball, but I really love men's volleyball because there's something kind of pure about it, right? There are not many scholarships involved. So the players who are playing are typically playing because they really want to, they want to be there. And, it's a different kind of vibe, as opposed to, oh, I'm getting paid to be here as a professional, or I'm representing my country. There's a lot of pride in that. There's always a different perspective. But I was really surprised at this match to witness some poor behavior, and it's a classic scenario where you have a top performing athlete from the team who's also a team captain, who just is having a rough night and gets pulled out of the match. And instead of, I've seen oftentimes where, okay, even the captains, they'll go and they'll be a part of the bench and they'll try to encourage, from the side. But instead of seeing that type of behavior, I saw some pretty poor behavior, and kind of, maybe along the lines of sour grapes, just kicking water bottle and separating himself from the rest of the substitutions, the subs on the team, and just isolating himself, down at the end of the bench. Understandably, he's upset, he's coming out of the match. But what message did that send, not only to his teammates, but to all the youngsters watching from the audience, from the side, right? And so I started to think about, well, one thing I think that is missing from the discussion, nowadays, is like the discussion of humility, right? What exactly does that mean? No one person on the team is any more important, than anyone else. And certainly, if you're part of a team, right, you need your partners around you. You need your teammates. It doesn't happen alone, especially in a sport like volleyball, right? 6-on-6, 2-on-2, no matter what the format is, it's not a sport that you play one-on-one, right? So you always are going to need somebody. And that whole discussion about humility, raised the issue of, okay, you have to also discuss loyalty, right? And what I was telling these kids, on Monday is that, hey, loyalty doesn't just mean you shake your head up and down, every time your friend or your buddy, wants to do something, even if you think it's wrong, right? Sometimes loyalty includes, giving somebody a little bit of a reality check and say, hey, man, that behavior is not okay. You're better than that, right? And then as far as determination, it's the idea for these young people that, okay, your destiny really is in your own hands, right? It's not up to somebody else, to create your path for you or to help you down that road. You have to create your opportunities for yourself, right? And as you're creating opportunities for yourself, you then will also create opportunities for other people, whether they're teammates or friends or colleagues or people that you don't even know yet that you're going to run across, at some point in your life or in your career. So I thought it's been a really interesting couple weeks, discussing this with different groups, and they're all, it's all been with younger people, right? So teenagers all the way, high schoolers all the way up to, to college graduates. But it's been interesting to hear what, they've all had to say about it, because a lot of people find it, I guess, comforting to know that you don't, if you're right now, you're part of a team, you're part of a sports team or part of a business team. And, if that should ever end, it's not the end of the world. You'll find another team, right? you'll find another way, right. And a lot of the student athletes, especially, they look at what I do. So I actually work in the world of sports, but my role with USA Volleyball is voluntary. It's a volunteer board of directors position, and it's an honor, to serve, but you have to be, very aware that you've got to leave the business to the business people, right? And you've got to try to support, the people who are working there and getting paid to do what they do, every day. And for some of the kids that I speak with, they think, oh, how do I get a job in doing that or doing this? I said, well, first of all, you have to put yourself in a position to understand the industry that you want to, eventually be at the top of, right? You have to put yourself in a position to learn, right? And they're sometimes very surprised by that. What more can I learn after I get out of school? Oh, surprise! You'd be surprised. There's quite a bit more
Definitely.
that you can learn. And you can also learn from, one of the reasons why I like doing things like this, aside from giving back. And, I got a lot out of the people that I interacted with when I was a student, got to listen to their perspectives and, every once in a while have a conversation, about goal setting and things like that. But I learned as much from these young people, as I do from people older than me, or when I was their age, from people like myself who, come in and speak. So there's definitely a reciprocal benefit, to hearing what they all have to say, or what they're thinking about, or what the issues, are on their minds. And it's always refreshing because it's different. It changes. What they want to know, what they want to hear about, changes. I think maybe the only thing that stays the same is, how do I get a job when I get out of school?
Definitely, because once student loan starts going.
Absolutely, you bet. It took me. Somebody asked me in this last, actually not this last round, but in one of these seminars I was doing earlier, they asked me, well, gosh, how long did it take you to pay off your student loans? And I said, well, don't be afraid by this answer. I said, but I took the route of, okay, I had two, different loans, and I started paying them right away, even before I graduated from school. As soon as I was allowed to start paying them off, I started paying at least the minimum. I said, and by the time I was 31 or 32, and they all kind of like, that sounded so old to them. I said, oh my God, and you forget, right, how young people are when they're in college. Because when you're in college, you felt kind of like, hey, I know enough, I know a lot. And, I probably know everything I need to know, right? You think you're so old. But yeah, so it was, it's there are different things for young people to contend with these days. Every generation has its challenges, right, and also its benefits. But nowadays, I think, the lens is much larger, that everybody is being scrutinized with, especially with social media and the internet and technology, in general, right? And somebody's accomplishment, will be celebrated just as much and just as actively as somebody's failure, right? Mm-hmm. Just as many eyeballs on your success as there is on your failure. And so I think that puts a lot of pressure, on these kids coming out of college. So from my perspective, from the student athlete perspective, from the person who works with athlete perspective, my advice is always be flexible, right? Don't ever accept just one way, that things can be, right? So if you're a student athlete, you're lucky enough to get, on a college team, and that's a privilege, right? It's a definite privilege. Just because there may not be an athletic opportunity coming next doesn't mean that your life will be completely void of athletics. You'll eventually, you could still participate recreationally. You could go into the business of sport. You can go into a business that supports sports. One of the points I make in this presentation is, you'd be surprised around the world that the people who are involved in the sports world actually don't work for companies that are like professional teams or, specifically sports products. They work for technology companies, they work for communications companies, they work for finance groups. A lot of the sporting events, produced around the world are connected to government agencies like tourism or convention and visitors bureau associations, right? A whole nother industry, the hotel industry. If you think about it, the hotel and hospitality industry, airlines and ground transportation and rental cars, they are among the top percentage of sponsors, and supporters and partners for collegiate athletics, professional athletics, so I think that it kind of, to hear that perspective for these student athletes and even for non-student athletes, right? That, oh, hey, if I have an interest in something, whether it's arts or culture or sports or, just any area, that you can still have that involvement and that passion, even if you're working at a bank or in retail or, it's somewhere else, you can still translate that into some sort of involvement or support, for the sport that you love. Right?
That's key. I kind of think
Yeah.
because everyone wants to go into sports,
Mhm.
whether you're an athlete or whether you're the student, a lot of times they always say go sales,
Right.
marketing, you want to go work in sales and work your way up that way. So for you, was that kind of like the kind of route you took? I saw you did sales, you did the marketing, you did promotion. So that kind of like what the route you took?
Right. That's the route. The route that I took was all of them actually, and that's what helped me so much. It wasn't until I got, like I said earlier, it wasn't until I got into the sporting goods manufacturing area that allowed me to understand budgets better, to understand channels of advertising and sales and marketing and everything else. And it gave me an opportunity to actually sell a product, which I didn't think was something that I would that I would necessarily, be good at or enjoy.
Definitely.
Right. But what it comes down to is just being able to, you have to learn or already know something, about what you're selling. Right. Obviously you need to know what you're putting out there. And that was a good exercise for me because I didn't, I wasn't just selling volleyball. I was selling water polo and football and soccer. And so that gave me, kind of a more well-rounded look at what other areas of sport had to offer, in comparison to mine. Right. It helped me figure out what was good about those other, what makes soccer so popular, around the world as opposed to other sports. Why is there so much money in golf and tennis? And so to understand questions like that, or to be able to, look into areas like that, actually helped me identify what was valuable and positive about my own area of sport, in being such a volleyball oriented person. Right. So one example is, you don't think about it when you're a kid playing or when you're coaching or anything else, but there is a whole industry wrapped up in like club sports, right? As an example. And I mean, every, basketball, soccer, tennis, I mean, private club sports is its own industry for the most part. And right about the time that I was coming into sporting goods, in volleyball in particular, club sports was on this huge upswing. People had already known about it and were engaged in it, but then somehow there was this whole new population of people that seemed to all at the same time, get involved and want to get involved in club volleyball. And, there were lots of very entrepreneurial minded people at the time, tournament directors and coaches and club directors who were trying to find ways to service, this growing population of not just kids, but parents, right, and coaches. And so what has developed over about a 25-year period is this whole industry, kind of touching back on like hospitality and transportation, like this whole kind of a tourism industry almost of these massive consumer-driven club volleyball tournaments that take place all over the United States. USA Volleyball, it's their sanctioned event of how people qualify for the USA National Championship. And it's amazing. When they first started out, I was working with a couple of the different organizations, and again, behind the scenes, right, trying to figure out how to sell a product. And my product was volleyball, so that was a pretty, pretty done deal. You need the ball in order to play, so everyone's going to need to buy something. But to watch these events, over the last couple decades, develop and grow. I mean, I've seen everything from cities lobbying politically to increase the size of their convention centers so that they can accommodate volleyball. I've seen new companies come into the mix that had nothing to do with sports, that all of a sudden they see like financial groups. They see, 50,000 people, stuck, for the weekend inside a big convention center with hundreds of volleyball courts. And at first they don't think that anything of it, but then they realize that, okay, for every child that's out there playing, there are a set of parents that's wondering, how am I going to afford to get my child into, to pay for college, right? Not everyone's going to get a college scholarship. So now the financial industry comes into it with, student loan advice or things of that nature. So, again, it's very, cyclical. Is that you find these needs for the consumers that are involved in sports, right? And then to translate that back to like the young people that I've spent the last couple of weeks with is like, there's opportunities everywhere to be involved. if you're a finance major right now and you end up, getting a job in that industry, okay, when you have the opportunity, maybe talk to somebody at your company about supporting a volleyball tournament or a soccer tournament or whatever it is that you're passionate about, right? If you're a law student right now and you're going to take this path of being a litigator or a corporate attorney, okay, every law firm in the United States, has a portion of their proceeds that they dedicate to, to nonprofit or cause-related, issues. Well, no better cause than to get kids off the street and getting them playing sports. So advocate for that. So it's just sort of opening the door a little bit, and getting folks to think about, their sport in a different way, right? How can I be involved in a different way?
Definitely, because for me, like my journey, I was a walk-on at Oklahoma, and while the walk-on, I was interning for the university's housing and food services. So I was doing marketing stuff for them. Then I go to practice, and I would do their products. So I kind of realized, like this sports thing, like it's good now, but one day I might like figure out this life after.
Right.
And
right.
it's like how do I position myself to where I'm maximizing both sides, where I'm giving it all of my sport, but also giving it all to my my career type stuff. So
right. I met this young man several years ago, and it was right after one of these talks in a class, and he was very much like yourself. He was a walk-on student athlete, but he was also carrying two work-study jobs on campus, right? And one of them was working with the athletic department, basically game management, to help set up the venue, prior to work during the event, and then obviously help, make sure that everything was torn down, after the fact. And, and he obviously was part of, a bigger team and had a full-time employee was his supervisor and all that. But it was interesting because when I was chatting with him, he sort of felt like when his student career ended, so would his job, right? Doing this, this game management. And I asked him, I said, well, why do you think that has to be though? I mean, I understand the work study, the student work study part of it would change, right? But why not take what you've already, learned and the skill set, that you've already developed and see if you can't parlay that. And if you really love what you're doing and that, that's one of your three jobs that you actually really love, right? Why not see if that can't be a career choice? And so he just looked at me like puzzled, like he didn't think that would ever be an option. I said, listen, part of the whole, kind of struggling when you're a younger student, there's another side of that, your supervisor and the people that are already employed, in these positions, they're always looking for new talent. They're always looking for people who can do a good job, for people that can, work within the system and make it better. Right. And his comeback was really pretty astonishing because he said, well, I don't know, like, how would I be able to even start to approach that subject? I'm a terrible communicator. I said, well, wait a minute. Look at what you deal with on a nightly basis in this arena. You're handling customer service, you're handling ticket request, problems that people have with their tickets. You're handling a little bit of marketing, and so much that you're hosting corporate sponsors, showing them to their suite or showing them to their seats, or helping, the marketing department if there's an activation and they need an extra hand or two. You're talking to people that, he didn't even realize that his regular communications with just the people that come to the event, like that's experience. Right. That's not everybody can talk that easily to people they don't know, but also to solve problems for people that might be coming at them with, angry faces and like, hey, I didn't buy, I didn't get my tickets, or I didn't get my, my free ball, or, whatever it was. And so, you think about when you're a person looking for new people to hire, sometimes, okay, you can read the resume and one person's resume may look flashier than another person's, but until you meet that person or see them in action, right, it's really difficult to tell, what kind of potential they might have or how they might fit into your organization. So another thing I always encourage, these people, young people to do when they're starting out, or even anybody, looking to change careers, or I do it myself, oftentimes, is to volunteer, right? Volunteer for a special event, whether it's sports related or not. Because you get to probably more importantly, you get to understand how things really work, and if you do or don't want to be a part of, something like that. Certainly there's an aspect of relationship building, but from the flip side, the people that you are working for, if you do a good job, especially as a volunteer, somebody who's not getting paid, to be there, that's a terrific reference for you, a job reference or personal reference or professional reference, because that person really doesn't have a dog in the fight, as to whether or not you get that job, but they will definitely notice.
Be your advocate.
Done a good job. Yeah, exactly. And the same is true on the reverse. If you didn't do a good job and you sort of wasted the opportunity, they will notice that as well. But the volunteerism part of it, is a real. I mean, I have so many examples that I can think back on of people who have volunteered at any age, right? Whether it's just out of high school, just out of college, or in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s. But they volunteered with a project or with an event or with an association or a company, and that has led to additional engagement, whether it's a job or business opportunity or personal connection or something along those lines. So that again, it's just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit. How can you take your athlete experience, student athlete or professional athlete or otherwise, and parlay that into a career path, once the playing part of your life is over, right? And I go through that a lot, not just with college kids, but working with the U.S. national team. So there's a big discussion. There are a lot of athletes in our sport, in volleyball, can have an extended career. The lifespan is a little bit longer. Some of our sitting athletes are in their 40s and 50s, and then we have some on our indoor volleyball team that are going to retire, in their 20s, right? Some of them, in their 30s. Beach volleyball has a little bit longer lifespan. You've got athletes right now. There's a gentleman, his name is John Hayden, who's been an Olympian indoors and aspiring to be an Olympian, for beach volleyball. But he just turned 46, I think, 45 or 46, and is considered one of the top, athletes in our sport. So for our discussions with these, national team professional athletes, it changes a little bit into, okay, when I retire from active competition, now you're talking about being, 10, 15, maybe 20 years past your graduation date, right? Past your sell-by date, and the anxiety is real.
Yes.
Am I going to still have that same skill set? Am I going to, still even be able to exist in the field that I studied, that my major was in, or anything else? And so it's a whole different conversation. So you really do emphasize a lot more the kind of thinking outside of the box. What skills have you acquired in that 15 or 20 year career, being a professional athlete, that may translate now, into a more business oriented, career, a non-active, non-physically active, competitive role, but still, using the skills that you've developed.
So when it comes to that, with your volleyball athletes, what's like the best resource for any athlete that want to start figuring out either how to the transition or just trying to figure out a little bit more about the other side of themselves outside their sport? What's the resources they can maybe use to kind of get into business or whatever it may be?
Well, surprisingly, the best resource for a soon to be retired athlete is another retired athlete, or somebody who just has a passion for sports. So give you an example. There are, in most areas of sport, what you'll find is there's a pretty diverse interest off the court or off the field, in whether it's investment interests or, again, business or finance or technology, or, there are other areas of interest that a lot of these professional athletes have, right? That's not always as well publicized, because you're just talking about statistics when you see them playing. You never hear about, or you rarely hear about other interests that they may have, especially business interests. So I oftentimes will recommend, to an athlete getting ready to retire, that you reach out to one who already has made this transition, right? To see what it was like for them, but also, that it's a pretty tight network of people. They understand, how anxious you can be when you're trying to figure out what your next step is. And so whatever they can do to contribute to that process, oftentimes they're very, very willing, to do that, right? Whether it's just sitting down and having a conversation, or introducing you to someone else that may be able to mentor, you and help you with your decision. I had some conversation over the last couple of years with athletes that had been in our program for like a decade or more, right? So they really were struggling to figure out, okay, do I even want to go into the field that I studied, in college, right? Much less can I, or are there any opportunities, but do I even want to do that anymore? Or have I learned about other areas of interest that I have that I might want to pursue? And, I've seen everything from, athletes who studied one thing in college, but then they have this opportunity to do something completely different. Like a lot of athletes go into speaking, into public speaking, right? Or they engage with companies where they can use their experience in building a brand, of themselves as an athlete or their team, as a collective, and they end up in marketing or merchandising or production, producing something that they want to learn more about. But really the biggest resource I have found are other athletes, athletes to athletes, or people that understand, what it's like to take a hiatus from the corporate world, and come back, and how hard sometimes that can be, right? And they advocate for each other. And it's turned out to be, I think, the most valuable resource for some of the retiring athletes.
So I think, like, from everything we talked about so far, I think the biggest thing is the power of your network.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is, I think that's something that we can all kind of value from the coach we had when we were in high school up to the coach we had when we were in college or pro, or the person you worked with when you're intern, whether you work with in professional. It's like,
right. The network is important, right? But I think what's within the network, it's the relationship building, which becomes increasingly more important, especially the older you get, right? I think one of the great things that you try to share with people coming into an industry is, I try to get to know as many people as you can and meet as many people, your network building, right? Trying to understand who people are in the industry that you want to exist in. But let's be real, right? Not everybody you meet is going to be somebody that you continue to work with or will be engaged with on a day-to-day basis, right? And you may or may not even run into them at any point in time, down the line in your career. So within that network that you build, it becomes increasingly more important to identify, the people in that network that you can really establish good working relationship with. Sometimes it won't always be a personal social relationship. Oftentimes I encourage, keep business separate from pleasure. There's always going to be some, social aspect intermingled between, but really be clear about, who are your business contacts and what is the real relationship that you have with those people, as opposed to who are your personal contacts. You may still do business with them, but these would be the people that you could, pick up the phone and be a little bit more casual with, or ask a favor, that you might not otherwise feel comfortable to ask, right? And so the relationship building becomes, I think, even more important than the networking. It's always important to know who, like they call it reading the room, right? Who's in the room with you and who belongs to what association and what roughly do people do. And that's part of the exercise, with the network building. But then developing those relationships from among those people, I think, is the challenge, right? And if you can do that, and if you can do that successfully, those people, and it may be a smaller group, than you thought, those people will continue to help support, guide, and mentor you, and you will do the same for them, right, as well.
I love that. And I think this trailer has been so insightful, because just to kind of hear how you just navigate this whole journey, there wasn't ever just like a set direction. You just knew that I wanted to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're willing to take a chance, if you're willing to take a risk, a calculated risk, right? And oftentimes your risk, when you're younger, your risk is based off of, well, does that job pay more? Then I have to take that job. It's based on the reality of your life situation, right? I got to pay the bills. I have to pay my student loans. As you get older, your opportunities and the risks that you may take with them are a bit more calculated, and so, it's risk and reward, right? So in this case, I think for me, I haven't always made the right decisions or the right steps, and even at, even being in this business now almost 30 years, I still experience the downfall, just as hard as I did when I was in my 20s or 30s or, and such. So again, it goes back to, you always have to have a mindset that there's something more you can learn than what you already know. Right. And as you develop your inner circle, it becomes really important to filter out the people that, are presenting themselves to you because you work together, or there's something they can gain from you or you can gain from them, as opposed to that real tight inner circle of people that you may not see every day, you may not work with every day, but you have a deep enough respect for and a good enough relationship and rapport with, that you could contact them out of the blue and say, listen, I have a situation. What would you think about this? And those are your key relationships, within your business.
That's funny because I was just talking with I think it was Georgianne Moline. She runs track and field, Olympian, and she was saying for her it was the power of her village, like that small village.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your village, your tribe, your people call them lots of different things, right? And it's terminology wise, I think it's very suiting that we refer to team, right, in sports, but also business schools, they refer to their staff and their group, their working groups, as teams. Because it's that applies everywhere you go. The life lessons you learn, especially as a student athlete, definitely are applicable in your life, the rest of your life outside of the world of sports. Right. Sports for some people are an outlet, they're recreational. It's a way to, enjoy time after work. And for some people, sports is the work, right? It is what you make your living off of, and you exist in that world completely. No one way is better than any other, but again, you can always learn something. You can always contribute something. Right? And no one person in your organization is any more or less important than anybody else.
Love that. So a few more questions for you. So right now, are you on social media, anything like that? Social media, or website we can kind of mention right now?
Yeah. So I am on social media. All my handles are the same. It's just Lori Oki, at Lori Oki. I encourage people to follow, some of the organizations that I think are, interesting to them, whether it's a team or a national federation or an individual. I follow a lot of Paralympic sports and Olympic sports. But I really, I think if you have an interest, even if it's outside of the area that you're working in right now, follow it. Social media can be a blessing and it can be a curse, right?
Definitely.
I think one thing that's great about social is it can keep people connected, right? And it can keep people informed on areas that they are interested about. If you start to take social media as sort of like the definitive information source, then I think you run the risk of getting into a couple of sticky situations. Yeah, but if you take it as a way to just sort of get a bird's eye view, of an area that you're interested in, and then do your own research, go and do your own, look into it a little bit more on your own, then I think it can be a really valuable way to keep people connected. I'm not really, I'm not really big into the influencer categories. I do appreciate the brand building aspect. There's a gentleman named Jeremy Darlow.
I read his stuff.
Yeah, he's fantastic because I think he comes at it from a very real place when he talks to people, or talks to athletes in particular, about the importance of building their brand. Right. It's not all about the me culture. His information is really very balanced in that, he reminds these athletes, particularly when they're younger, right, that you have to be very careful, what you present or what you portray of yourself, because you just never know who's watching, right, or who's following you, and what they may interpret or misinterpret, from what you're putting out there, your brand. In our sport, I really like one athlete in particular. I mean, I like them all. I follow, as many as I can, but there's one athlete in particular, and I know her very well. But April Ross is one of our beach volleyball Olympians. She's a silver medalist from London and a bronze medalist from Rio, and she shares as much of her failures as she does her success, right? And she shows the
That's
imperfect
powerful.
side. Yeah, really. I mean, really it's very vulnerable to, and she shows the imperfect side of her day, as often as she shows, something that's a, kind of good, or something special, or something that, she's been lucky enough to be a part of because of her career as an athlete, right? She takes it very seriously. It is a career, and I think for that reason, people like her, and there's lots of other examples, like that, but I use April sometimes as an example because of the fact that she does show you her, weaknesses as well as her strengths, right?
I
And
love
she's
it.
not afraid to do that. Yeah, she's not afraid to just put it all out there, right? Which is powerful, which is really powerful.
That's one reason why I started 9 Point, because because I had that problem. For me, like, do you know anything about 9 Point? Like, do you know anything like about the backstory behind it?
Well, I went on your site and I read a little bit about it, and I was fascinated completely. But I would love to hear it in your words.
Okay. Oh, yeah, sure. So for me, I was, like most athletes growing up, whatever, I wanted to go D1. That was my goal. So my senior year of high school, I had some few smaller offers, some NAI type stuff for football. And senior year homecoming game, I tore my ACL. First quarter, 4 plays
Oh
in.
man.
And I went from, this guy had all these big dreams to like, who am I without sports? Like, what's my identity? Because all my life, everyone knew me as Jacoby the athlete.
Right.
And
Right.
so I know I went through that whole process. I was kind of, I would say it wasn't depression, maybe it was close to it. And I remember, like, I felt like, I'm going to walk on to Oklahoma, my track team, because that was my dream school, Oklahoma. And
Mm-hmm.
so I walked up to track and field at Oklahoma my freshman year. We had our first meet January 20th. We are doing like block starts the 17th, and I pulled my hamstring doing blocks.
Oh God.
So I went again from, having all these big dreams to like being so close, and it's gone. And the coach was like, "Hey man, thanks for coming out, but you're off the team because you can't really earn your spot to say you can run with these guys." So again, it was like this anxiety, depression stuff. And the next year, I walked on again at Oklahoma, and I made the team. I got to run and all that good stuff. But through that process, I was like, man, there's no place for me to hear real stories like this. There's no
Mm-hmm.
place to hear how athletes are coming back from their adversity and how they're overcoming these things, because you feel so alone sometimes, because if an athlete says they have anxiety or depression or they're struggling, they call everything but an athlete.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of made this place. So I want to kind of just bring it all together to share the good and the bad, just so that way we just know that it's okay to be human. Like,
Yeah. We're all human, right? I mean, we all have good, bad, and ugly.
exactly.
Yeah. That's, it's, to me, I think your path is, very similar to mine, and now I really applaud, you're creating a voice, right? You're creating an opportunity for yourself, but also look at the opportunity that you're creating for everyone else, that you're engaging with, right? And that's really what it comes down to. It's, what more. And when you get to the point, like for yourself, being at such, and this was just part of the discussion about humility. God, I'm going to use you now in my presentation.
Awesome.
The ultimate definition of humility is just what you described to me. You're an elite athlete with an identity, a brand as an athlete, right? And then all of a sudden, in a heartbeat, and I remind, especially when I'm speaking with teams, right? I remind them that this can all go away in a second.
Split second.
Right. Yeah. In a split second. So, complaining about having to go to practice or not giving your all in practice. And I talk with a lot of young, like high school age groups as well. I said, just imagine for a second, just sit here for 10 seconds. So that's how long it takes for it to all go away.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it kind of like, oh my God, and don't forget to thank mom and dad. And, it was interesting because the last group that I talked to, college age kids, it was Menor College down in San Diego. They left it as an open, certain sports teams were asked to come, and then they left it sort of open, for other people to come and sit in the theater. And I didn't realize at the time, but, I'm a big person about like, you should, if you're an athlete and you get into the gym early or the arena, you should shake the hand of anybody you see walking around you and thank them, for anybody sweeping the floor or putting up the, equipment or setting out the chairs or anything. And you should try to do that before you leave, right? Or at the very least, people that you interact with, whether they're holding the door open or security or the ticket office, you would be amazed at what just a simple, kind word can do for that person's day, right? And so in talking about that aspect or that and that part of the loyalty part of it, right? Be grateful for the people that you may never know or you may never meet or you might not ever know their names, but these are the people who make it possible, for you to to do what you do, right? To be a part of this like amazing experience that you're having as a college student athlete. And then after it was over, and the gentleman who set this all up is actually a really, really good old-time friend of mine, volleyball friend of mine. And it wasn't something on my schedule, but that's the relationship building part, right?
Mm-hmm.
He saw on Facebook that I had done one of these discussions, and he goes, my team could really use a chat like this, right now. Do you think there's any way you could, make it down here? And what you do for those people who do for you, you give back, right? Mm-hmm. And so after it was all over, I'm chatting with my friend, who's the men's volleyball coach. And he tells me, he goes, well, he couldn't stay, but he goes, our facility manager was sitting in the back of the room. He goes, and he just wanted to say, like, thank you for that mention about, like, it's important to recognize the other people around you that are part of the team, but they're kind of behind the scenes, because you just have no idea, how important just one acknowledgement could be to those people. And
they work hard too.
And they work hard, but also they are among those of us, right, behind the scenes, that maybe they wanted a career in sports. And this is their way to, be close to the sports, any sport, but sports that they love, right? So it really, it transcends, I mean, the desire to want to work in this industry transcends, just being a player on the court or a person with the team or a trainer or, and that was the other thing. Apparently there were a couple of athletic trainers, sitting in the audience as well, who were surprised that I would mention, about athletic training. But you think about it, now I got hurt too when I was a high school athlete, and you blowing out your ACL, like how important were those people to you, especially in high school?
Everything.
Your trainer, your physical therapist, your doctor. I mean, geez, and these people virtually, they're there before everyone, they're there after everybody. And sometimes people don't even know who they are or what their names are, or, anything else. So I think, your story is very compelling as well. And so bravo to you that you're actually putting into action, right? This whole project with 9 Point, because it's empowering other people that you may not know yet, right? You may not, you may not realize yet, exactly who you're reaching, right? Exactly who's listening. So yeah, bravo. I mean, your story is it's very similar to, a lot of the ones that I hear, and even my own, right? You can always find a way to be involved, and contribute, right?
I'm a big believer that every athlete has a story that can inspire another athlete on their journey.
Totally.
Yeah, I think sometimes we get so scared to share because we're scared of that. We think that it's not important, but
right. Or we think that people won't appreciate,
mm-hmm.
the what you've been through, or they'll make fun of it, or they'll think you're lesser than if you can't play the sport anymore. Like, oh, geez, that's such an old, outdated mindset. But the big thing right now too with athletes is the self-care component. The taking time out for mental health or even just physical health.
That's funny. That's funny you say that. I did a post the other day about that, because I tried it for myself, like getting a therapist. I was seeing how I'll get in this cloud and I could not see out of it. Mm-hmm, and I'll just be like, how can I get out of it? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go see a therapist. I'm going to go see a psychologist and figure out how can I work my mind to understand better myself.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it's, whether it's your therapist or sports psych, or even just like taking some time off. Mm-hmm. We have an athlete on the men's national team. There was a great article about him just before the Rio Olympics. His name is Matt Anderson, and in the United States, nobody knows his name, right? But in the world of volleyball, he's like Kobe Bryant, right? I mean, just legendary, and on and off the court. A guy who has really diverse business, outside interests that he's been involved in, charitable works, had a family member with autism, and so he's very active in raising money when he's home, and trying to be involved in the different charities and all that. And in our sport, at the professional level, there is no professional volleyball per se in the United States. So these athletes, if they go professional, which a lot of them do, they have to go overseas. And so for the last, gosh, I can't even remember. It's been almost 10 years, I think, that he's been, or actually maybe closer to like 7 or 8 years. He's been over in Russia, mother Russia in the middle of winter, right? And and he is a national hero there, but that doesn't replace not having your family around, or not having friends. Obviously he has friends, the guys on his team or other guys from the U.S. that play in the same league or something, but it's not the same, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the same when you're not, when you're living somewhere. Well, for one, you can't go outside half the time, right? Because it's just too freezing cold, right? But you don't speak the language, or the culture is different, the food is different, everything is different, right? The sights, the sounds, the smells, everything is different. And just before the games, like, he realized that just from a like I need to be at my best to perform my best, like, he was just burning out. It was too much to be away from his family, at that particular time. And so he took a self-imposed time out, right in the middle of the season, right before the Olympics, which was, good because he needed to rest. Like, his body needed to rest, but more so his mind, needed to rest. So there was this fabulous article in the Orange County Register out in California about him. Look it up if you can. Matt Anderson is his name. But it was just like, he's always been somebody that just sort of walks to the beat of his own drum, right? He's not afraid to, be the guy who speaks up, or says something that's different from everybody else. He was somewhat of a natural leader, even when he was the youngest guy on the team and wasn't the voted captain or anything like that. He leads by example. He doesn't need to be the captain. He doesn't need to be the main guy that everybody's focused on, but just by virtue of his actions, and his, his drive, right, to always be doing something better than he did it, 5 seconds ago. He emerges as, a real focal point in the world of our sport. Arguably the best player to play the game. I think, at this point, he's, just all around really solid, plays multiple positions, which is tough in our sport. So that's to me, another example of, this whole idea about every once in a while you need a break. And I mentioned to you, if you get the chance, and I can email you some people, there's some really interesting athletes that are doing kind of non-athletic things, that I think might be real interesting features here. I emailed you once about a gal named Victoria Garrick. And Victoria Garrick she's a graduating senior at USC, and she played women's volleyball there, but she really struggled. And it sounds, I'm just getting to know her, over this past year, but she really struggled in her past with body image issues. I'm not sure if there were even any like severe eating disorder, behavior or anything like that, but she really struggled for a long time with her weight, and she's not necessarily, most people who struggle with their weight, they think they're overweight, but she's not, right? But for years, she was given the impression that, oh, if only you could be, more slender like this person or like that person, right? And so she's actually now she's done with her eligibility. She's graduating this spring in just like a month or two. And she has been engaging in a lot of social. So on her Instagram, she's just Victoria Garrick. She has started coming forward right after her season ended with her struggle and, kind of the real vulnerable side, right? Like, oh, there were days when I couldn't leave my apartment, or I got dressed, or I couldn't get out because I just didn't like the way I looked, in this outfit or that outfit. And I just was in despair. she puts it all out there, right? And it's very raw, and it's very jarring, and you feel like, you feel like she's your daughter and you just want to throw your arms around her at some point, but she's very real and she's very honest, and she's targeting now, or focusing a lot of her message to younger athletes, who are maybe going through the same thing. It's fascinating. It really is quite fascinating what she's doing right now, because it's hard for her. like she gives the impression that she's very at ease, with the public speaking, and she's very good. She's actually quite compelling, and she speaks, she speaks the same language as these young kids in high school and junior high school who are struggling, with the same issues that she struggled with. But she'll be the first one to say, "Oh, I'm horrible. Oh, I should have done that better." I'm like, no, please. God, my God, the fact that you're even talking about this, subject matter, especially with female athletes in particular, who are so touchy, about their appearance, or am I going to fit into this uniform, or, anything else. I mean, we used to have this discussion in sporting goods all the time as to why do the top apparel companies, sporting goods kind of like Nike, Adidas, Puma, why do those companies always make women's athletic uniforms in like extra petite? Because, by the way, we are not extra petite. If you're playing a sport and you're healthy and you're fit, especially in volleyball, you got girls now who are 6'8", right? They are not going to fit into an extra small. Even if their body frame is extra small, that thing's going to look like a tube top, once they put it on. So, we even had those discussions, in the industry about it. And now there's this, now Victoria brings up a lot of these issues. It's like, and I think it's very cathartic for her. I'm sure it is, but also she's getting feedback from all around the country, all around the world, right? And she's engaging with all different ages of not just female athletes, but there have actually been some male athletes who have kind of picked up on the topic she's talking about. But yeah, you know what? Like, I'm small for my age, or I'm, I didn't start, I didn't hit puberty until later in life or whatever. So here we are in the high school weight room, and everybody can lift everything. I can barely lift the bar, and so she's resonating with, a really diverse population. She would be somebody I would absolutely encourage you to touch base with. To me, she's fascinating. I mean, just her story is fascinating. There's so many athletes that's such a taboo subject, right? But here she is just throwing it all out there, and, yeah, it's rough. Like, it's not all, hearts and flowers on her, on her page or on her blog. Sometimes it's some really rough stuff. Like, she'll talk about even, like having a breakdown right now, like, she thought I was going to have this speaking engagement, and I just, was getting all the materials together and looking at the pictures. My presentation reminded me of that day that I felt so insecure, I felt whatever. She goes, and I had a moment, so she puts it out there, and I'm sure it's very, it's very therapeutic, but she's very real, like very honest, and I think that's why she resonates with such a diverse population of people. I'll look forward to meeting you at the Global Sports Summit.
Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Absolutely, yeah. And then, I'll introduce you to, if you haven't already met him, I will definitely introduce you to Ken Shropshire. And I think he might also be a very interesting person to feature, on your site, or maybe get some connectivity with the Global Sports Institute, like the actual, because they put out a lot of stories and everything else, but that he might be a really interesting person to do a little, interview with, because talk about diversity in sport. Like, it's amazing the career that he's had, and also behind the scenes, the career that he's had. He's a lawyer by profession. So as he's been, being the dean of students at Wharton, and now the CEO of the Sports Business Institute, he's also been practicing law, corporate law. Like, he's represented tons of, high profile athletes and everything. So it's a real interesting kind of, somebody who went from the football fields at Stanford, right, and almost, being on track to the NFL, to then creating this whole other life as an educator and a lawyer, and now another life. This is his retirement job, this whole other, world now. This is his fun job that he gets to put these stories out, into the public, and and kind of share a little bit with with folks that only knew him in one capacity.
It's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Like,
you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome.
This is awesome.
Right. And then I'll see you next Friday. Well, I'll be there. Are you going to go Thursday for like the mixer and everything?
Mm-hmm. I'll be there Thursday.
Okay, good. Well, you have my cell number. So when you get there to the Palomar, just give me a quick text and I'll come find you. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Lori, thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yo, thanks for listening to this episode of the 9 Point Started With a Dream podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, leave a review. We would love to hear your thoughts. You can find more athlete-driven content at 9point.com. Till the next episode, you're only one opportunity away. Peace.